The market is heading towards more electrification.
What is actually the market ready to buy in terms of solutions today versus what they just want to explore?
If these things are in alignment, then you have a real business case.
What happens when the idea seems right, but you have some other signals or feelings that the market still needs more time to digest?
And your idea, whatever, no matter how innovative it is, someone else probably thought of it and brought it.
What are the factors that automotive leaders, you personally think or feel that they are out of sync within the automotive ecosystem or the changes around them?
The truth is today, for EVs, you need to have an ecosystem in place. And that's the challenge. Think that they can just sell an EV the same way they're selling an ICE vehicle.
In the automotive industry, we always talk about innovation. And when we talk about innovation, it's always related to timing, new innovative ideas, demand, and even tech. So today, Dawlat, and it's a pleasure having you on board, we are going to actually tackle that point, but from the sales side. Looking into demand, timing, when the ideas are being introduced, so on and so forth. And the main two questions I had in mind while preparing this episode is actually, when is the market willing to buy? And what are we forcing? And when it is actually best to introduce those innovative ideas, basically. So the first point we're going to tackle is basically the market readiness. The market readiness towards the innovative ideas, basically. And in here, the main question would be, what are the customers actually ready to buy today, not just to explore?
Thank you, Shady. I'm really happy to be on the show. Thank you so much for hosting me. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. And especially that before you answer, you have a long record of success within that innovation field.
Thank you so much, Shady. I really appreciate that you think so. That means a lot.
You've been in this business since the EVs even were introduced. So I know what I'm talking about. But really a pleasure having you on board.
Pleasure is all mine, Shady. Thank you so much.
Now, let's jump straight away. And we'll tackle the first point, which is the market readiness to various ideas. But let me ask you this straightforward. What is actually the market ready to buy in terms of solutions today versus what they just want to explore, basically?
Solutions that they want to buy as opposed to what they want to explore. Okay, so for starters, today, the market has specific needs, right? What they need is ultimately what they're going to buy. Exploration, I think it spills more into innovation, right? Everybody's looking for innovative solutions at the end of the day. But what they're going to buy is actually what they're going to need, in a nutshell.
But that takes me to the next question. So we see a lot of leaders excited to launch new ideas, new products, so on. But when you look at that from the other side of customers, what are the customers ready to embrace, basically?
I think customers, it varies on the preferences of customers. You have different age segments, right? Okay, younger generations are open to new concepts, new innovations. Older generations might be a bit more skeptical, maybe stuck in their ways, whatnot. But especially a market like the UAE today, it's a very ripe ground for innovative solutions and ideas and products. And this is something that the country and leadership is pushing for, which is why I think it's safe to say that we're one of the most advanced countries in the world today, with all kinds of innovative solutions, from AI to electric vehicles to basically autonomous and robo-taxis now that are being launched, to advanced aerial mobility. So it's to even electric boats. So you have we're covering land, air, and sea. And we do it very well here in the UAE.
But this gets me to the next point regarding from interest to action, basically. When does someone move from, yeah, let's look at this, or it's an interesting idea, but then that customer or that person will move to the next phase, which is let's actually explore that?
Okay, that's a very good question, Shady. So basically, you're asking me, how an opportunity becomes a real business case in a nutshell.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm trying to be nice in a way.
I appreciate
rephrasing
that.
it.
I appreciate that. To answer your question, look, basically a real opportunity becomes a business case when you take it out of the realm of, innovation and vision, and you put it out into the open on solid ground, and you start testing it. And then it starts building traction, okay? And you see the different stakeholders actually engage and follow up and want to know more. But it's not just about their interest. It's more along the lines of finding a believer in the market that believes in your product. But before all of these things, there needs to be certain aspects in place, okay? So first of all, let's say today, I want to launch and manufacture a supercar. Fine? We're seeing a lot of that today.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. It's cool, But anyways, for that to happen, there are certain, of course, elements that need to be in place and certain stakeholders that need to be aligned. For example, you need the funding, investors. You need the parts manufacturers. You need the designers, okay? And ultimately, you need to have potential buyers, right? Because how else are you going to break even, right? And make some profit. So these things need to be in alignment. If these things are in alignment, then you have a real business case on your hands.
But then what are clear signs? Should I take those points which you mentioned as these are the clear signs which tells you that the market is ready or going to move on? Or
I'll tell you something. I think the market today, it's ready for new ideas and new innovations. But it's our job as experts in the field to create opportunities. Okay, it's not just about, I think, finding opportunities. It's about creating opportunities. If there are buyers, if there are interests, then I don't see any reason why we wouldn't bring in new products and new innovations. If we have the right stakeholders and teams aligned, again, because it all happens in execution, right? And that's sometimes why plans either pick up or why they fail.
But from a sales guy to a sales guy, I'll still gonna ask you this again. What signs do you always look out for in the market that tells you that market is going to move on?
Look, for me, when I assess risk in any market, okay, in any emerging, let's say, industry, and mobility is definitely an emerging industry, especially electric mobility. Today, we need to see, we need to understand how the public is going to react to it. Is the market, let's say, educated enough? Okay, is there enough awareness? Who are my competitors? Okay, are there mandates and policies that support me to scale? Because that can sometimes be, a make it or break it point. What else? Also, I need to see who's my target audience. Okay, and what's my value proposition? What makes me stand out? What's my unique selling point? What's my competitive advantage today? All of these questions need to be asked and they need to be answered. And that on its own, I believe, it minimizes risk.
From signs into signals. And that's how you normally read the market trends. Mm-hmm. What signals always tell you the direction which the market is moving towards?
Okay, I'm going to give you a live example. So last week, basically, His Highness Sheikh Mohamed bin Rashid, okay, he came out and said publicly that within the next 2 years, 50% of the public sector, aka the government sector, is going to move into agentic AI. This is a thing. This is the new trend. And now, of course, for players that are already in the market, like maybe like us as GP, for example, okay, we have a lot of experience in agentic AI and generative AI and all kinds of different solutions today. So, and we've been around for a while, right? So we've entered, I don't know, maybe almost 30 years ago or so. So for us today, we hold the largest market share, okay? As opposed to, let's say, new players that are going to enter now. But having said that, now would be the right time for these players to start showing up with these solutions because it's already been announced. Whereas maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it wouldn't really have been a thing. It would be too early.
So these kinds of signals are the ones which actually tells you, like they give you some idea on the direction, and based on that you start reading
the market. You see the focus, where it's heading today. And it's not just about obviously what the government is saying or not saying at the end of the day. You see, the movement in the market through even word of mouth, through reading and doing your market research. And I do read quite a lot. And you see trends, okay? And that points to where the market is heading next.
And also gives you like you mentioned in your example, the ahead, which is 2 years. So that gives you some signals also in terms of timing.
For sure, because today, look, governments, they don't think like you and me. They think very much long term, okay? I'm not saying we don't think long term. I personally think very much long term, and I know you do too. But when I say long term, they're thinking, from now until 10 to 20 years long term, not like 1 or 2 or even up to 5 years. So whenever they come up and actually say and make public announcements, it's based on a thought out process and plan that they have in place for where they want to take a specific industry. Another example, Shady, aside from what I mentioned with regards to AI, like for example, last year in May 2025, okay, the government issued a mandate where basically, every single company needs to do emission reporting. So, and that's obviously a form of accountability, right? Now, the deadline is this month actually for organizations to submit their emissions reporting. And those, of course, that are going beyond the accepted level are being fined. And they're being fined between 50,000 dirhams to maybe 2 million dirhams, if I'm not mistaken, which is hefty. And that just shows you today that the market is heading towards more electrification and decarbonization and less carbon emissions.
Moving to the next topic, which is of course still linked to the signals which you mentioned, is in the enablement within the markets. When I say enablement, I mean by that when we are looking at the trends and also the opportunities, there always has to be the enablers or factors that enable the success or adoption of these innovative products. And in this case, I will be talking about EVs, new ideas, new platforms, as you've mentioned, some innovations within the mobility sector as well.
100%. There's a lot, yeah.
But the real question is, can innovation be sold separately, or these enablers are actually crucial for the success and the sales within that service or product?
Okay, Shady, that's a really good question. Way to corner a girl. But I'll answer you. Okay, so today, yes, an innovation can be sold separately, okay? However, that risks potentially failing. But when you have an ecosystem that backs it up, then it's more likely to succeed. For example, let's take Tesla Motors, okay? Tesla, it's one of the very first EV manufacturers, or as they dubbed themselves, technology company. It entered the market in 2013 and started selling electric vehicles. Now, along the way, it realized that it needs to build infrastructure for its clients, and it needs to build charging networks, okay? Which it did do, basically. So it created an ecosystem. It created, first of all, you have the vehicle, you have the home charging, you have the charging network, you have the maintenance and after sales, okay? So it created an environment that made it comfortable for a consumer to actually take a risk at that point, because it was still very early, and actually adopt an electric vehicle. Another example, BYD today. Why do we see it everywhere? Because Al Futtaim, they launched back in 2023 something called charged to move. Okay. And they basically built the infrastructure for these fleet operators, guys like Bolt, guys like the DTC. And that's why you see them everywhere. I ride, maybe once a week in an Uber on Saturday night, and almost every single time I have the BYD Han come and pick me up. Why are we not seeing maybe other brands, okay, basically with fleet operators? We are seeing them, but maybe not as abundantly as Tesla's and BYD, simply because they haven't invested in actually building an ecosystem. At least not yet.
I love those two examples because they outline the importance of always providing the ecosystem for the innovative ideas. And that's basically what the markets are missing. A lot of markets and even automotive players, even when they come with an innovative solution or innovative service, for example, they miss out the fact that they need to look at the whole ecosystem which they operate in. So, yeah, agree with you 100% on that.
Thank you.
Spot on.
That.
Out of curiosity, how do you distinguish the gap between what's real and what's just noise?
Wow, that's a really good question, Shady.
I told you you'll be cornered in a couple of points today, so floor is yours.
I don't mind. No worries. Corner me as much as you like. I think, actually spotting the gap between, or the disconnect between what's noise and what's real goes back to planning and execution. A lot of organizations today, they don't plan to fail, but they fail to plan correctly and execute.
Love the statement.
It's kind of cliche, but it's true. But thank you for that. So basically, for an idea to be real on the ground today, okay, let's go back to that. When it's in the execution phase, there are certain enablers that need to be in place, right? Let's take an example from the advanced aerial mobility, basically division or branch of mobility, okay? Today, for example, for me to be able to fly, okay, the passenger eVTOLs, I need to have license, okay? I need to have strong operations team. I need to have, obviously, a very strong investment, and I need to have vertiport partners for takeoff and landing, okay? And of course, I need to have a government entity backing, okay? These 5 things. Now, if I have these 5 things, then I'm ready to go to the next level, which is actually to start the flights. After, of course, I've done my R&D, after I've done the test flights, after I've done all of these things to ensure safety, because these are human lives at the end of the day at stake, then, of course, I'm ready to the next level. As opposed to maybe other players in the sphere that maybe may not have all of these, let's say, enablers, in place. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, pretty much, because it does outline that each entity or player within the market has to be quite equipped with the right enablement factors for his success.
100% plan and execution.
Otherwise, it's just noise. And the next point is basically the sales cycle reality. And again, I know you since some time, and I know you're a good salesperson.
Thank you, Shady.
And when I say a salesperson, it's not really an insult, but you really know how to pitch. You really know how to look at innovation and even have that eye for these kinds of opportunities. But let me ask you something within the sales know-how.
Oh, no. Okay, go ahead.
Now, in selling something or a new service or a new innovative idea, basically, what is that different from selling the traditional automotive services or products?
Okay, that's a really good question, right? So I'll start with the following. Back in 2023, okay, when I was still doing Mobility Live and I was still leading that, it was still brand new, right? And it focused solely on electric mobility, which was an up and coming trend, okay? That on its own was a risk, right? Because, you know, I believe a lot of automotive players still in 2023 did not even have EV brands yet. A lot of them, I remember Mercedes-Benz had it, Audi had the e-tron, Mercedes had the EQS, Alpha Tame had Polestar, but then you had a lot of players that still did not, their vehicles simply didn't arrive in the market at that time. So pitching, a brand new platform, okay, to a market that's still catching up, yeah, it was a challenge. But there's one thing that I know. I know that today, Rome isn't built in a day. And I believe in ecosystem building very strongly. So today, when you're laying down the foundations, right, you're going to go out there, you're going to meet with the different stakeholders, the different OEMs, the different distributors, the different government entities that are backing up mobility in the market. And you need to build a relationship with these players, okay? You need to see what they're launching in the market, how much they actually believe in electric mobility in the first place. What's the roadmap looking like for guys like these? So to answer your question, going back to the main question you asked me, it's all about exploring the market, having a feel of the market, having a feel of the clients and the players that are within that market, and then knowing when to pitch and when to wait.
I believe someone who's selling the innovative products or services usually has to have very high energy proactively, but then we always get stuck at somewhere before that real decision is being taken by the decision makers.
That's when you need to push harder.
So how do you deal with that?
Okay, I'll be honest with you. Today, when you've been in negotiations with a client for several months, a lot of back and forth has been happening. Momentum, is sometimes lags towards the final stages. For me, and this is my signal, and from my experience, when momentum starts to be lost towards the end, that's the time when the decision is being taken, either to move forward or to not move forward. And that's why I'm saying that today, that's when you really need to push. Because today, as salespeople, our job is to add value to clients. Our job is to cater and customize solutions that are going to add value to clients. Otherwise, why would they even buy it in the first place? So it's my job today, when it's nearing the final stage, which is the closing stage, to push harder, to show today that there's value in this, that this is something you should be doing, you should be taking on board. It's good for you.
But then speaking about the momentum before the decision is made, why would you think, and especially that you mentioned that it's either they go forward or they simply kill it. Why do some ideas move forward and other ideas simply get killed?
I mean, look, I'll tell you something. Going back to the momentum question you asked, right? I mean, towards the end of any cycle, right, you're going to see if what you're selling, whether it's a solution, a platform, a service, whether it's on your client's priority list at the moment or not, okay? So when momentum lags, again, there's two things happening. Decision will be made soon, from my experience. Maybe some people will not disagree with me, but this is my experience. Second is that I will know what's my priority, where am I in the list of my client's priorities at any given moment.
Still talking about momentum here. What happens when the idea seems right and all the signals, symptom, everything aligns, but you have some other signals or feelings or guts, like we always mention it, that the market still needs more time to digest. What do you do on that?
From a sales standpoint?
Exactly.
Well, here's the thing. The thing is that momentum at that point, okay, when you already have established momentum, okay, but let's say I know for a fact that the market still needs to mature more, okay, that's not going to stop me from pushing forward with the idea or the innovation. I'll tell you why. Because today, let's say I'm introducing a new product in the market, okay, I'm introducing, let's say, any form of innovation, okay, into the market today. And I know that mobility has been, the topic of choice with the government and with the stakeholders for the last 4 years, okay? But I know, for example, that the infrastructure still needs to mature more. And I have a charging solution that I want to bring into the market. Okay, something unique, not something like a charger, something more unique, let's say, than that.
Like very much when they introduced the REEVs, for example,
exactly.
within the EV ecosystem.
100%, which was a smart move, by the way, because
Exactly.
it gave people comfort, right? which actually curtailed range anxiety.
It added the convenience and it addressed it in the right manner for something which is not fully ready when we are talking about the whole ecosystem which you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So going back to momentum, I think in that period between when there is momentum, but the market is still maturing, okay, that would be a good time for you to actually introduce your innovation. The reason why is because not many people are going to be doing that. They're going to be thinking, oh, maybe it's still early. Maybe I should wait until the market matures. But by then, if you're going to wait until the market matures, you're already too late. The market will be saturated. And your idea, no matter how innovative it is, someone else probably thought of it and brought it.
But then this takes me to the next question regarding the market behavior, especially in the Middle East. We see a lot of times that we think the market is slowing down, but in other words, it's basically customers being more selective. What do you think of that? Which is actually right? The market is slowing or they are being more selective?
I don't necessarily think it's because the market is slowing, and not necessarily because, clients are or customers are being selective. I think it's a mix of the fact that today you're having a lot of options of the very same thing. Like, let's say I want to buy a car, fine. And today, me personally, I'm a big fan of German cars, okay? I love German cars. But then again, around you, there are so many different kinds of vehicles, German and non-German.
True.
Great cars, okay? With technology and with everything that you will need in a vehicle, okay? Fully loaded, as they say. So for me as a buyer, I'll look at it and say, okay, what am I going to buy? So in that point, I am being selective because I want to get the best value for money, to get the best value for obviously, insurance, who's going to give me potentially the best loan, et cetera, et cetera. And that could mimic the market slowing down, whereas the market, due to so much, let's say, saturation of different, let's say, products like vehicles, people are, I don't want to say lost, but it's like an open buffet. It's like, what am I going to eat next, basically?
I think it's basically prioritization when customers look at it. Like, for example, like you mentioned in your example, it really depends on the selection and the priorities and also the time that they find solutions or various choices. It may seem to some of the players that they are being delayed or it's slowing down, but others would have a great season or a year, for example. I think it's the selection that depends on all these factors, including economy.
There's something else I want to say. speaking of us sometimes thinking that the market in a specific segment is slowing down, like a couple of years ago, okay, there was a lot of info coming out from the government that they're going to build charging stations, okay, through a specific government-backed player. And it went quiet for a while. And we thought the market was slowing down when it came to charge point operators. But then suddenly, they made a new announcement back in late 2024, and they went full speed. And now they have over 400 charging stations and counting across the UAE, and more of them are picking up now.
And let me add to you to that, because they didn't only rely on the government entities, they actually assisted and they encouraged even the private sector, like in malls, for example, to have charging stations, encouraging also the new buildings, for example, to have these charging points, and to even encourage these kinds of initiatives.
Of course. So just because, something is slowing down, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's, basically over, or it's delayed, or it's stalled. No, sometimes things are happening behind the scenes.
Now, talking about behind the scenes, and we had a couple of rough months in the past period. You like everyone else is, of course, aware.
Yes.
The war around us. And we are kind of in a heated zone. So when forming the decision towards adopting innovative ideas and solutions, do you always see after that period that decision moves faster, or it's usually planned that it goes in a special or a specific sequence?
Due to the geopolitical situation, you mean?
Yeah, and comparing it to the normal situation.
Look, I think in times of uncertainty, what happens is that the market filters itself out. The serious long-term players will remain, and then the short-sighted, short-term players potentially could exit. Okay, but today, long-term players don't think like, okay, there's a geopolitical tensions that, okay, I'm going to stop my entire initiatives and projects and whatnot. No, because they're thinking 10 to 20 years ahead. They already have plans and set in stone. And this, small tensions like this, no matter what the scale is not going to stop their plans from from happening. Bad stuff happens all the time. So I believe it really depends on the players and on the vision. Is it short term? Is it long term?
True. 100% agree. Now, this takes us to the next question regarding the movement within the markets and how you actually can push things forward or just simply wait for it to happen. Now, how does bringing the right people within the conversation help you push for adopting that specific decision towards the innovative solution, basically?
Thank you for that question, Shady. I need to think for a second. So I think at the end of the day, credibility and reputation is everything in the market, okay? Today, when you are working on a project, let's say, with, big entities that have been in the market for a very long time, either locally, regionally, or globally, they have a lot of experience in this field. They've done this hundreds of times, okay? That on its own builds credibility, okay? That builds trust, that gives you that comfort that this project that you're trying to execute has a very high chance today of success. Because going back to what we said earlier, today, for a project to, scale and to be executed, you need to have proper planning. Okay?
Planning and alignment between
between the different stakeholders. True. So today, like we said, we need investors. We need, let's say, car parts manufacturers. We need also potential buyers.
Even the teams within those entities.
Of course, the operations teams, the engineering teams, the design teams, all of these things, and also the numbers, right? The numbers of how much I need for this investment to actually kick off the ground. And sometimes, if you get those numbers wrong, you could halfway across a project run out of funding.
And by the way, I believe that this specific point which you mentioned, which is basically the ROI, is one of the most crucial points that can actually unlock those decisions and help them move forward.
Yes, for sure. I agree with you. Like every single organization today, when they launch new products and services and solutions, they're looking for ROI. Some of them, they're looking for ROI now. Some of them are looking for ROI in the next, 5 to 10 years, depending on how they think, really. Okay. Like today, for example, the CPOs, okay, that are building all of this infrastructure. They obviously understand that today they're not going to be at peak utilization, 100% capacity, because still the market is catching up. But we have about 7 to 8% of electric vehicles encompassing the ecosystem, which is honestly for a rich oil country quite impressive. Some people might think that's a small number globally, but locally, no, it's not. It means that we are definitely progressing and heading towards that. And these kinds of entities can see that. So they have built the infrastructure and they're building the infrastructure. They understand it's going to be a long-term investment. And these same entities, they're the ones that are going to capture the ROI.
I think that also is related to the timing, as you mentioned, because it was always outlined within the conversation. It's always, as you said, ROI, and then that's also related to the long-term planning and the timing. So speaking about the timing, basically, what kills the momentum faster? Is it pushing too early or missing the moment totally?
I think it's both. I think today, like let's say you're entering the market too early as a player. I'll give you an example. Let's say you are a car parts manufacturer, okay? You entered the market in the UAE back in 2023, fine? Where there's still barely any manufacturing, fine? But today, manufacturing is picking up. And the government initiatives are pushing, and ADIO is really pushing, and so is Kizad. So you have a lot of momentum going around, creating a hub in the United Arab Emirates for manufacturing. So while these players entered early, if they have a lot of patience and deep pockets, which I know some of them do, okay, then when this manufacturing is going to pick up, they're going to have the largest market share. Whereas, let's take another example. Let's say an EV charging OEM, okay? It decides to enter the market today instead of back in 2023, okay? And this is coming from live experience. And the market now is saturated. So basically, they've already created for themselves some huge barriers to entry already.
True.
So in this case, back to the question, which is better, to enter late or to enter early? I think it depends on the segment in mobility. If you're a manufacturer, then entering early could be risky. If you're an EV charging OEM, then start coming now is risky, because the market is saturated. So it depends, I think.
I love how you actually answered that, because you answered my next question, which was how do you actually sense it between it's time to move versus wait?
Okay, but I will answer it for you. It's always good to move, Shady, if there is an opportunity available to you. Like going back to EV charging infrastructure. A few years ago, I advised one of the big EV OEM players, okay, in charging, to enter the market in UAE, because I saw that there's a lot more potential here for them than in another neighboring, let's say, Middle Eastern country. Fine. Today, they want to enter the market here. And they've told me is that they see a lot of potential for them to grow here. And that's something I already saw 3 years back. But then again, every organization has its strategy and has its planning and has its timing to move.
It has its own dynamics, basically.
Exactly, right? But timing is everything today. And you have to have a sixth sense, that sort of gut and when to move. When's the right time? So definitely today, when it comes to EV charging OEMs, entering the market now is going to be challenging. Whereas for, let's say, manufacturers, it's the right time to enter.
But then I got to ask you this, because it's related to the automotive reality which we are living in. What are the factors that automotive leaders, you personally think or feel that they are out of sync within the automotive ecosystem or the changes around them?
Thank you for that, Shady. That's a really, really good question. And it's one that's honestly has been on my mind for many years now, okay? I don't know if I've ever said it out loud in public, but I will now. So I think potentially a lot of OEM or, leaders in automotive are ignoring a very important point, which is today they're treating ICE vehicles much like EVs and EVs much like ICE vehicles. The truth is today, for EVs, you need to have an ecosystem in place. You need to have charging infrastructure. You need to have, obviously, insurance. You need to have maintenance and after sales, much like what BYD and what Tesla have done, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you are able, as a distributor or an OEM that has electric vehicles, to provide that kind of service and charging solutions to your clients, then that's going to make your life a lot easier because they will buy from you. But you cannot treat an EV the same as you're treating an ICE vehicle, because we've had internal combustion engines for the last 150 years, if I'm not mistaken, right? So the infrastructure is already there. Whereas right now, when it comes to electric mobility, what we're trying to do is we're incorporating the infrastructure for electric vehicles into an ecosystem that did not previously support it. And that's the challenge. And that's what I believe a lot of automotive leaders are ignoring. Or maybe they're not ignoring it, but they think that they can just sell an EV the same way they're selling an ICE vehicle.
I would need to add there something, because you're totally right in this. Leaders need to be more flexible in digesting the differences between different products or services, even different verticals within their business. I mean, I'll give you a specific example, which was mentioned in a couple of episodes back. Sharif was talking about the consultancy, and he was talking about that the main challenge he has seen within his journey was that leaders sometimes treat rental like sales, like after sales, coming from passenger background or commercial background, and they tend to treat each vertical the same way. However, I always saw and I always believe that the leader has to be very flexible in terms of solutions and how he adopts it and how he executes it. And I think that's very crucial. And it aligns very much with what you are saying.
Thank you for that, Shady. Agreed. Another thing I'd like to add to that is, and this is not just something that automotive leaders sometimes make, I think it's a lot of leadership, let's say, is that they don't listen to the changing needs of their clients. Because today, your clients, they're not going to want the exact same thing over and over again. They're going to want something different. They're going to have different needs. And I'll give you a live example, honestly, from my experience. So about a year ago, a lot of, distributors and OEMs are shifting towards experiential drive, okay? Driving experiences for their clients, right? And a lot of them said to me, they're like, Dawn, it's great to come and display our vehicles and have that awareness and exposure and meet with our target audience. But we want our audience and our potential clients to actually get a real feel of driving these vehicles, right? So for me, the first thing that came to mind was like, how can I create that experience for them so that I retain them, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't adapt to your clients' needs, eventually they'll find a competitor or someone else that will align with their needs.
You're 100% right, because it's always about the real demand within the markets. And I agree with you 100%. Now, the next and last point is actually the confidence to act. Now, when we talk about the confidence within the markets, when someone is considering something new or a new idea, like we were talking about, what makes them say, yes, let's try that?
Wow, what a question. Well, he has to have a lot of guts, huh?
True.
I think for any entrepreneur or any business to want to adopt something new and bring it into the market, like we said, there has to be certain market conditions that are already pre-existing. There has to be mandates in place. There has to be infrastructure in place. We're not saying it has to be 100% perfect. No, we actually don't want it to be 100% perfect. Because, and this is my own personal belief, if the market is already matured, then you're going to have a lot more barriers to entry, okay? True. No matter how innovative your solution is. So going back to the question, today, certain things need to be at least, in progress or in progression, like the infrastructure, like the mandates and policies, which we do have. And then, of course, the buyer appetite, okay? And the market demand and the, I believe, awareness that people have. Like today, for example, I see a lot of people buying electric vehicles. Whereas a couple of years ago, that was, they were a bit skeptical, like, okay, I want a V8 and, I want it to make a lot of sound and I want to go off-roading on the dunes. I was one of these people. I'm being honest here. Why would I switch to electric? Okay. Whereas today you're seeing that because the ecosystem is being built, okay, still in maturation, but being slowly and steadily built, more people are adopting electric vehicles because they run well. They don't need a lot of maintenance. They can charge at home. Guys like BYD, which most people are buying, my cousin has one. They have a network for charging. So it's just really overall, it's convenient. And it does technically save money over the long haul.
And I think, and I truly believe this, is that it's the enablers, the appetite of the customer, the real customer demand, and what it addresses, if it actually fills a gap that the customer has. These are the main things. Of course, connecting the dots at the end of the day and looking at the ROI from the investor point of view. I think these are all the factors that form up and address the confidence within that. Am I right?
100%. 100%. Today, for businesses to scale, okay, you need to have certain, like we mentioned, you need to have certain things in order. You need to have the right players. You need to have the right market momentum. You need to have the investment, and ultimately, you need to believe in whatever it is that you're bringing into the market.
Dawlat, I really enjoyed the conversation today, and you really added a lot of perspective and info, and I hope it really adds value to the end listener. But thank you very much for coming today, and it was a true pleasure.
It's my pleasure, Shady. Thank you so much for having me. And I really do hope that we add value to all of our viewers and clients. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.